session. But my name is Brian Strauser. I'm the chairman and executive director of the Minnesota Gun Owners Political Action Committee and Caucus. And what we're really going to talk about today is grassroots engagement, or how do you raise money, win elections, advocate for your cause, and influence voters here in Minnesota. And I'm going to help you understand how to do that by just telling you our story about how two guys took $100, because that's all we had, and figured out how to start a political action committee, influence political races, and get candidates elected. And then just our observations on how we look at races and evaluate who we think is going to win and therefore endorse and support on gun rights issues. I was supposed to be doing this with Rob Dorr, who is our political director, but he is sick, so I'm flying solo today. This will be fun. What you need to know about me, just for background, I was at Target for 21 years as the head of crisis management within the corporate security team. But I have a background in crisis communications, so it kind of plays well into politics on how do we communicate, how do we respond to things that are going on. I've since founded my own company that does the same thing for clients, and then we started the Minnesota Gun Owners Political Action Committee in 2013. We're not going to talk much about the actual issue of gun rights, except in terms of how we leverage this to elect, support, or defeat candidates that we cared about over the last couple of years. But I know I'm at the Libertarian Convention, so this is different than when I talk to Democrats, because I know where most of you, at least, probably fall on the issue of the Second Amendment. My background in shooting started when I worked in law enforcement in Indiana in the early 1990s, before I found myself at Target. And I didn't do much with the topic of gun rights until 2013, when I started volunteering with GOCRA, and I think you heard Andrew Rothman speak earlier today briefly, and that took me to becoming an NRA instructor and then an NRA Chief Range Safety Officer. If you remember the political situation around late 2012, you had kind of a seminal event in gun rights when this Sandy Hook massacre happened out in Newtown, Connecticut, and they just had this group of parents was just lobbying in Washington, D.C. last week again. But Sandy Hook was really something that galvanized several anti-gun groups for the first time, because prior to this, the issue was really kind of dead. No one was proposing new gun legislation, new gun control legislation in the states or federally, and nobody was really backing any large groups to push for gun control. And Sandy Hook changed that. Michael Bloomberg, the New York City mayor, who would like to tell you what size of Coke you should be able to purchase, funded a group called Mayors Against Illegal Guns, which was really not about illegal guns, it was about gun control. A PR executive in Indianapolis, Indiana, Shannon Watts, formed a group called Moms Demand Action. And then a few years later, actually 2 years ago today, those two groups merged and became Everytown for Gun Safety in America, or Gun Sense in America, which is the largest gun control group that's out there. How this played out in Minnesota, if you remember, is that you had DFL control of the Minnesota House, the Minnesota Senate, and the governor's mansion. So you had one-party control in both houses, and they could pass any legislation that they wanted. So here you see Michael Paymar. At the time, he was the chairman of the House Public Safety Committee. And in early 2013, he announced that he would hear a comprehensive set of gun control legislation in the Minnesota House. And then his counterpart in the Senate, Senator Ron Latz, said that he would do the same thing. So now you've got both houses coming at some type of gun control bill. So we all had something to say about that. On a typical day of hearings, and there was a week of hearings in the House and there was a week of hearings in the Senate, and some of you may have been there for some of this, there was on average about 15 folks advocating for gun control and about 800 people opposed on a daily basis. And you can see some photos, a photo of that from here. So despite the fact that they had complete one-party control, they couldn't get a single bill even voted on in the House. Actually, let me back up. They got one watered-down bill out of the House committee onto the House floor. Nothing was passed in the Senate, and then the bill in the House was killed. And it was killed because the Iron Range Democrats were afraid that they were going to lose their seats. because they're typically pro-gun up north. Now they're on the wrong side of a lot of issues from a liberty standpoint, but they're typically pro-gun, and they thought they were going to lose over this issue. They convinced their leadership to pull the bills, so the bills were killed. And you can see some of the headlines here where the guy who wanted gun control, the Speaker of the House, Paul Thiessen, had to pull the bill. And it was an interesting quote in that story that hundreds of supporters packed the hearings, thousands of emails and phone calls, and that the gun control organization seemed to lack organization. So when this was over and we started thinking about what is this going to look like in 2014, and then there's an election in November 2014, what can we do about this? Because I never, ever want to go through that again. And knowing that politics really happens in smoky back rooms like this one, we decided that two of us, Mark Okern and I, would split off from the Gokra leadership team, and we would form a political action committee. And the intent was, while Gokra and other organizations lobbied, that we would attempt to elect a pro-Second Amendment legislature, a pro-Second Amendment governor, and the other constitutional officers here in Minnesota. And we didn't care if they were Democrats or Republicans or Reform Party or Libertarian. I just wanted them to vote on our issue our way. And if they didn't, I wanted to beat them with somebody that could. So we did this. We didn't talk to any lawyers. We didn't talk to any accountants. We didn't talk to anybody that actually knew politics. And then we started talking to some people about, well, how do you raise money? And we were told that you guys are nuts. And they thought we were crazy because political action committees are typically formed by somebody that can write a really large check to that political action committee and then convince their really rich friends to write really large checks and do the same thing. And I was like, okay, well, that has merit, but that's not us, so how can we go about and actually win? And so this is the story of how we did that and how you can apply this to libertarian politics. So the first thing is the money issue is huge. This is a mailer that was sent by a gun control organization called Americans for Responsible Solutions. This is a PAC that was formed by Gabby Giffords after she was shot in Arizona by a crazy nut job a few years ago. In this one mailer, which they mailed to tens of thousands of people across Minnesota, this was in support of Al Franken for Senate. They spent $154,000 on one piece of mail. We didn't have anywhere near that kind of money. So we had to find some creative ways to kind of go through this. So let's start with the simple one. We knew we needed a website. So we use WordPress. WordPress is pretty easy. You can install it yourself. You can host it somewhere. You can pay somebody a very reasonable amount of money to pull this together for you. We used a $50 political theme, and we had a designer create a logo for us. Now, I see all kinds of candidate websites. It's one of the first things I look at when somebody contacts us. So if you're a candidate or you're working for a cause, before you tell anybody you're running for office and you're thinking of announcing, you're starting to think about, okay, I'm going to announce that I'm running for office, and you're setting up your website. So first of all, finish your website. Before you tell people you're going to launch, have a donate button. Make it so that people can donate online. Yes, you want them to still be able to mail you checks. Some people still use checks, which I find strange. But you want people to donate online. You want them to go to your website, be convinced that they want to support you, and you want to take their money right away. Don't make them wait. I had a candidate that will remain nameless in 2014 that was running against an anti-gun guy. We weren't going to support him because we didn't think there was a great chance that he was going to win. So we weren't going to pour money into the race. But I was willing to give him money, my personal money. So I go to his website, and I'm like, well, this is a really cool website, but I don't know how to give you money. There's no link to donate to you, and there's no address to mail a check. So I can't give you any money. So I email him and say, hey, I want to give you money to your campaign. What do I do? And he goes, well, you can mail a check, or we're working on the donate button. And 2 weeks later, I get the email, now you can donate online. And I'm like, well, 2 weeks is an eternity in a campaign. So when you launch, you want, okay, who are you? Why are you running? What are the key issues that are important to you? and how do you give money to your campaign. You also want a mailing list, because the best way to raise money is through your mailing list, through some type of newsletter you send weekly or electronic asks for money, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you need those two things before you launch. So we pulled this together. We launched the Political Action Committee. And of course, I'm a former comms person, so we've got a pretty press release that goes out. And this got a lot of attention in the media because, one, nobody had done anything like this in gun rights at a state level in Minnesota, so it was unique. Second, the political press was very attuned to this because we had just come off this bruising set of hearings in March, April, May 2014. March, April, May 2013. And then we launched, I think it was October 29th, 2013. We got a lot of good press. We got a lot of follow-up interviews. That was great. And then we set about raising money, and we set about holding events to establish our credibility. So part of what we did is you want to find ways to build your mailing list. You want to find ways to engage with people that are thinking this along the same lines as you. So we went to where you always find those folks, at a gun show. And we still, in fact, I had folks at a gun show at the State Fairgrounds today doing the exact same thing. A really pretty picture of Al Franken here. And it was always great because folks would come and they would look at the photo and say, oh my God, you're supporting Al Franken, but you're here at a gun show. And then they would read underneath, help us get anti-gun politicians like Al Franken out of office, and they would start laughing. The best thing about this poster was at Game Fair up in Ramsey, if any of you go to that. Al Franken actually has a booth, and the owner of Game Fair actually always puts his booth across from us. And so we have this gigantic anti-Al Franken thing, and then his staff had to sit there for 2 weekends and look at this picture of their boss. It was a good time. We also worked to hold events for candidates that believed in our cause, because it both helped us establish credibility, but it allowed us to start giving money to candidates that were pro-Second Amendment. This is an event we held in Anoka. This is Representative Jim Newberger, who is from Becker. This was Mandy Bentz, who was running in House District 30A, I think it was at the time. But if you hold events for candidates, it counts as a contribution to them, but it's usually low cost for your organization to hold because you're really just giving the time in the event to be able to do that. Political action committees are unique in that they can endorse candidates and can give money directly to candidates as an organization. So we set about to find people that were running for office, that had a strong chance of winning, that were 100% aligned with our platform and point of view, and we didn't care what political party they were in. So this is Representative Jim Nash. He was the mayor of Waconia down in Carver County. Carver County, if you know the political environment, Democrats don't win. If you win the Republican primary or you're the Republican endorsed candidate, then you take 60 to 70% of the vote without trying. So Jim's real race was getting through the Republican primary. But he's been a great advocate for the Second Amendment in office. But we looked for candidates that we could endorse early on to establish the credibility of our organization and then help them in their race as we went along. The second thing that was important, whether as a candidate or as an advocacy organization, is data. For us, it was about voter data. I want to find people that are aligned with our point of view. Other than going to gun shows and running petitions or going to events, I don't know how to get at people. I didn't know how to get at people that would be aligned with our cause. But it turns out you can buy political data from organizations. So we struck up a relationship with a group known as the Data Trust out in Virginia, and we could buy data by political district, House district, Senate district, county, however you want to split it up. And you can use that data, you can phone bank them, you can direct mail them, you can send them postcards. There's lots of things that you can do. And you can get certain consumer data lined up with that. So for example, if I've got a set of voters and let's say there's 20,000 in a House district, and I know from other data that I purchased that 500 of them subscribe to Guns and Ammo, well, they probably lean my way. So those are people I want at my events, and I want to get them on my mailing list. And then if they take some actions, then maybe I want to send them and ask for a donation or a membership or whatever. So we did a lot of that to figure out How do we grow our organization? How do we get more donations? How do we get more people at our events? How do we get more volunteers? We ultimately transitioned our website off of WordPress to something fancier. We needed a political, really customer relationship system that allowed us to pull in voter data, that let us capture things they were doing, was integrated with, say, what they did on Facebook, what they did on Twitter, so that we could get a holistic view of people that would take donations, that could act as our mailing software. We ultimately went with Nation Builder. They're a nonpartisan political platform or community platform based out on the West Coast. We actually found them because I was looking at what the anti-gun organizations were doing, and a couple of them were using this platform, which led us to use the same platform as them, which I thought was rather sneaky of us. On the back end, this is kind of gives you an idea of what we see. Again, this is all what people are doing on our website, on our Facebook page, but we can see if we have people that are assigned as fundraisers, how much money they're raising. We can see kind of the activity that's going on. I can see how many donors and how much they're giving, and then how much per period this cycle, all time, what they're pledging. There's lots of different pieces of data in here. And then as we acquire data, we can pull that in and get more and more of a view for where people are at. When we run, for example, petition drives, well, we can see the petition activity in here, and we can see how many times they click and what they do. So it really helps us figure out how to pull people in and help them be more engaged in the cause. And this is just an example. This is not real data. This is from Nation Builder. But you can see this is what a member record would look like, and you can see some of the things that they're doing. This guy happens to be the most recruited RSVP, so he goes to a lot of events, and you can start to kind of segment people out. For candidates, the system is great because you can ask people to pledge that they're going to vote for you. It supports caucuses, and if you have to deal with all of that kind of thing that goes on. And this is what the front end of the website for the PAC looks like, and again, this is just on top of that Nation Builder platform. So you sign into our newsletter, you get the mailing list is integrated in there, you can segment that out as well. And again, donation online is completely integrated into that. This is the one-time donation page. You can also go to a sustaining donation page where you're donating on a monthly, weekly, or annual basis as well. When we started endorsements, we did press releases. You can see here kind of our first 3 big endorsements in 2014. But again, things that we did to drive credibility for the organization. We did a lot of email marketing within our platform. So using Nation Builder to send emails. We do a weekly newsletter to keep people engaged, and then there are specific action asks that we do. The one that we did this week was just to get more folks to sign up. We had a lot of new signups lately. How do you get more people to sign up as a volunteer? With elections coming on, there was a lot of opportunity to have people do more of that. Fundraising. Fundraising sucks. As you're a candidate, it is about the worst thing that you ever, I think, get asked to do. But the bottom line is you have to have money to win. I've seen some great candidates have $2,000 or $3,000 in the course of running for House, and that is not enough to get anywhere, particularly if you're running and you're not Republican, you're not DFL, because you've got even farther that you need to go in order to get the recognition out there that you want. So here's some tips, and it's not fun. When your campaign is new, you should make a list of all of your family and all of your friends and everybody that you've ever interacted with that likes you or thinks they would support what you believe in running for office. And you need to ask all of them for money. I know it's not fun, but that's how you do it. You can give individuals in Minnesota for a House campaign can give $500 a year. By the way, there's lovely disclosure around this. So if you give over $200 to a candidate, then your name, address, and employer gets filed with the Campaign Finance Board in the reporting that happens every quarter. So there's that kind of privacy thing that comes into play too. So start with your friends and family. The second is, as you acquire data, as you hold events, as you get people to sign up for your mailing list, send them a letter asking for money. And you can word it however you want, but there's no way around the fact that you have to ask very directly for a contribution to your campaign. And in fact, in your letter, which should be between 2 to 4 pages, you need to ask at least 3 times for money in the course of that, if you really want them to commit and give you money. Your letter, if you're sending a letter, should be on some type of letterhead. It should be on nice paper, so heavier weight than your typical copy paper. You need to sign it in an alternate color, or if you're printing it, which is what everyone should do, make sure that your signature is in blue or something that is a different color than the font, so it doesn't look like it came across a black and white copier, right? And you need some type of response envelope. You need something they'll send back to you that's going to have your donation and it has basic information in it. And by law, they have to submit certain information. You need their name, you need their address, you need their employer if they're giving you more than $20 in that donation. So there's information you're required by law to solicit as part of that. The third piece is, if you're running for any major office, House or Senate in Minnesota, then you're going to have to make fundraising calls at least 4 or 5 days a week for at least an hour or 2. So you can call people off of your list, call people who've given you money before, call your friends and family that said no the first time, and ask them for money. And again, you have to be direct in doing this. I'm calling because I want you to contribute to my campaign. Here's why I'm running. Could you give me $250? Or whatever you think the number is. The other interesting part of this is you shouldn't ask for $20 from somebody if you know they can give you $200. So if you know they're of means, ask for more money. And I know, again, this is not fun, but this is how it works. There's a website that has a lot of great resources for this. It's run by a fundraising consultant here in town. It's raisingtowin.com. She's got an online course. You can take that if you want. I have no relationship with her. Or just get her newsletter, and she's got a really good fundraising tip every week that goes on there. So if you're interested in influencing races, let's talk about 2 examples of how we've done this successfully, federal and state. The first is in 2014, and a rematch this year. Stuart Mills against Rick Nolan up in the 8th Congressional District. So this is Duluth over to the Brainerd area, and then kind of in a triangle down from there. So Nolan has been in office for a long time. And Stuart, of course, until recently, his family owned Fleet Farm. His father is the CEO. His grandfather founded it. Stuart's worked there for over 20 years. And he is as crazy of a gun supporter as probably any of us here in the room. And he doesn't look like this anymore. He had a gas grill accident, or so he says, and now he has short hair. Although I think maybe that's a cover for, I decided to get short hair so I could win. So here's Rick Nolan. Now Rick Nolan, for 30 years, has advocated that most guns should be restricted or banned. So one morning, a month or so, September 2014, I got a phone call that said, hey, we're emailing you a photo of Rick Nolan from a fundraiser yesterday. I think you'll like it. And I get this picture, and 2 things immediately come to mind. One is, Rick Nolan has argued for years that we should ban AR-15s, and here he is holding one. But what else is he doing? Gun folks here? You got it. His finger's on the trigger. So I look at this and go, oh, I'm going to have some fun with this. So we pushed out 45 minutes later this press release where we criticized Rick Nolan for a significant firearm safety violation. And that's fine. Most people would ignore that. But the best is we offered to purchase firearms training for Mr. Nolan at the Mills Fleet Farm indoor shooting range in Baxter, Minnesota, which is owned by the Mills family. So that, of course, got the press's attention. We were on several TV interviews that evening. But the point is, his campaign wouldn't respond to this, and the narrative for that whole night was all us. And it was the difference between Rick Nolan, who wants to ban guns, and Stuart Mills, who runs a gun safety training place and sells guns. So for our issue, it was great, and we continued to look for ways to push that issue. Here's the Star Tribune's coverage, and that came out 2.5 hours after we had pushed our press release out. So we're always looking for ways to continue to support our issue. Michael Brodkorb, who is a campaign consultant and columnist for the Star Tribune, talked about that our messaging was perfect, solid message, plus Nolan's gun training at Mills's range was brilliant. By the way, it was Stuart's campaign manager that called and sent us that photo, of course, to kind of stir things along.